Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. Again, this is one of those episodes where there's so much going on, it's going to be impossible to cover everything in one episode, but I'll do my best, or at least try to hit on some of these larger points. I think, first of all, there was this post over on greatawakening.win the other day. I thought it was a nice summary of what is going on regarding the sea. And Donald Trump, of course, controlling the seas and the importance of that right now, and certainly our military, as opposed to the UK government having any control over it, which, by the way, just a quick little history lesson, as a part of the end to the Revolutionary War, the agreement was that we maintain the land here in America. However, London not only keeps the banking system, but they also keep our Navy. Hence maritime law and all of that stuff. That's a huge rabbit hole, which I've been down before personally on my own time. I don't think I've brought it up too much on the show, but I recommend people go down that rabbit hole because it's fascinating. Either way, I think it's beyond evident now that we have control of our own Navy yet again. And I think that this happened in the first Trump administration, if I'm not mistaken. But certainly, of course, when he was walking in front of the Queen, and the symbolism of him walking in front of the Queen on the Queen's own grounds, that was rather important. And I think it was direct symbolism that we've taken back every aspect of our own military and that it belongs to us and not, some other backwards deal. So anyway, here's what this particular post said. It was titled, "Everyone Pay Attention to How Much Trump is Taking Control of the Seas." They said the following, quote, "Well, I can understand that everybody thinks that the recent blockade of Hormuz is around oil and oil alone. I would urge you to think broader than that. The seas deal with a ton of shipments, whether it be oil trade or, dare I say, human trafficking. For the Strait of Hormuz, to the Panama Canal, to Greenland, to everything else he's been doing, he's basically getting control of these little points where so much traffic passes through. When he said that there would be so much winning, we would say, no, Mr. President, stop winning. I'm now beginning to think he's absolutely correct. Think about it. We just waltz right into Venezuela, take their dirtbag leader, and charge him under American law. Park our destroyers and carriers right outside of Iran and just obliterate all of their leaders and all of their military in just a little over a month. Or was it under a month? I can't tell anymore. I really think Trump's hit to Islam, basically because they're a sex trafficking pedophile ring that is parading as an actual religion. I am surprised he didn't go harder on them. But considering that not all of Iran, has bent the knee to Islam, I'm actually glad he's taking a more pinpoint of pain direction to this whole plan. Anyways, as a guy who lives in Japan, I'm just sitting back and watching all of these glorious happenings take place. And then he just compliments a bunch of people, and there you go. Okay. Again, an interesting take from overseas, to say the least, and this is an individual who, again, is piecing it together and seeing the bigger picture of what's actually going on. See, Donald Trump is also in the middle of, again, trying to get Israel to stop bombing Lebanon. And the Lebanese government doesn't want Israel to bomb them anymore either, which, again, means who's the aggressor? They're on stage as being the aggressor. And of course, as they were doing that this week, the entire, the fake Holocaust remembrance ceremony or something along those lines was taking place in the White House. Again, I don't agree with it by any stretch. And I long for a day when that never happens again. Again, this ties directly into what I brought up in the last episode regarding the likes of Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and that entire crew. You'll never hear them deny the Holocaust. And even as Tucker is criticizing Israel and criticizing individuals who happen to be Jewish, he'll still say in his lesser tone, so to speak. So you can kind of tell that he knows what the truth is, but he doesn't want to say it. Because, of course, he's under a contract, and there's certain things that he still can't say, even though he claims to be independent. But he'll go on a 5-minute rant about Israel, Netanyahu, and the whole thing, and he'll say, but the Holocaust, it was just terrible. It was just an absolute atrocity. Again, that's just the dead giveaway that Tucker Carlson is not independent. He's not as independent as someone like me or somebody else who has a show who learns a particular thing and then freely shares it with anybody who listens. He's not in that group, not yet anyway. Not as long as he keeps signing contracts that probably stipulate either in the large or small font what he can and cannot say. So, again, I'm appreciative of a great deal of people and stories and other things that, individuals have brought up on his show and topics that have been raised and a number of other things. I mean, it's important stuff, but people, again, they still have to think for themselves and connect dots on their own. That's kind of the larger point here. But again, there's plenty going on, and there's certainly a lot of signal pointing here, too, when it comes to the stolen election of 2020 and the entire setup to that, which, of course, was the fake impeachment. And now Tulsi Gabbard, again, found her way to News Nation and was talking to Katie Pavlich the other day on her show. And I'm going to play this audio here for you. It's about 2.5 minutes long. This has been making the rounds as well. And again, the DOJ basically has everything. The military, of course, has everything. And it was last summer when Tulsi Gabbard, of course, dropped all this information. And this is when the real declass began. Because endless people are going to get caught in this net. And this is a big one. Eric Swalwell was, he was a little fish in the big picture. And now the big fish aren't going to get away. So give Tulsi Gabbard here a listen in 3, 2, 1.
And so the documents that we released really pointed to the fact that the 2019 impeachment occurred because there were members of the intelligence community working directly with House Democrats, specifically Adam Schiff, who's on the House Intelligence Committee at the time, concocting this narrative, weaponizing the whistleblower process, lying and abusing their power, all to create this manufactured basis that Nancy Pelosi then used to drive this impeachment against Donald Trump in 2019. I'll hit the high points on these documents. There are details and hundreds of pages of transcripts that we released in conjunction with House Intel Chairman Rick Crawford. But the bottom line is this. Number one, the whistleblower, so-called whistleblower who came forward, presented no evidence and no firsthand knowledge. This is a person who had heard about a conversation that President Trump had with Zelensky, then went straight to Adam Schiff on the House Intelligence Committee. And this is where they came up with this false narrative. And this so-called whistleblower then went and filed a complaint with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. The other witness, so-called witness to this, is somebody who also had zero firsthand knowledge and presented zero evidence, someone who was also a co-author of the 2017 Russia hoax intelligence community assessment that President Obama had ordered be created in conjunction with John Brennan and James Clapper at the time. Again, no firsthand knowledge or evidence, and someone who said that even after reading the transcript, he didn't really see the issue there until the whistleblower had explained it to him. And lastly, the Inspector General himself. And this is really such a violation of public trust and the responsibility that we expect all of our inspectors generals to have, in that he didn't conduct a full investigation. He didn't even ask to see the transcript of the phone call between President Trump and Zelensky. And he admitted to Congress that he did not have any evidence that he was relying on. He had made a criminal referral to the Department of Justice based on this so-called whistleblower's complaint. Department of Justice came back and said, there's nothing here. This Inspector General then went to Congress anyway and presented to them. All of this coming down to the bottom line of which this was a partisan political attempt, once again, to undermine the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump as President of the United States.
Again, they have the goods on these people, and this runs deep. I mean, you're even talking about basic paper pushers who are essentially saying, yep, this looks good to me, and then they sign off on it, and then they move it down the chain of command, or up the chain of command to basically see, again, who else receives that documentation, and then who's going to act on it. If they were even signing off on one piece of fraud, then the whole thing is fraudulent, and that individual, whoever they are, again, it's endless people, as we know, are directly involved, then they should all be scooped up. Unless, of course, you squeeze some of them and you say, okay, what do you know about this? And who did you talk to? And who did you tell? And what did they tell you? And 1,000 other things. I mean, you basically interrogate the ever-living hell out of them. But Whether this is done by the DOJ or the military is really anybody's guess. There's plenty of indication it's going to be the military, or it already is the military making these moves. But like I've said in the past, you don't, because it's the art of war too, you don't expend all of your ammunition at once. You wait for your enemy to fire, or you fire once, and then you let your enemy just exhaust themselves, and then you strike afterwards. That's how you take these people down. So again, Nancy Pelosi stepped in it, as I said earlier, in the last episode, I believe, of course, where she came out and said that she had no idea about Eric Swalwell. Well, as it turns out, that's not true, as one might imagine, because she's a pathological liar. But she knew everything about Swalwell, just like she knows everything about most people, again, who are in Congress. Certainly if they're on their own side. And then they use that information as leverage against the very people that they support on their own side. So she was blackmailing Swalwell as well. You have to almost assume that that's the case. But see, once you take the person off of the playing board, then Nancy Pelosi has nothing on that person anymore. Because the blackmail can't be used because it's already public knowledge now among everybody. And then a Pelosi or any other figure ends up losing leverage. And that's a good thing. But that's happening one piece at a time here, which is kind of cool to watch because, again, it's not accidental. It's not, whoops, he just got caught randomly. I mean, this is very strategic. They just so happen to have all those women lined up on CNN just ready to go. 3 women on CNN that he had apparently sexually assaulted, if not raped. One particular woman, again, separate from those other 3, immediately lawyered up and said that Swalwell raped her. I have no reason to doubt her. But again, the fact that the reaction to Swalwell was so swift and so organized, that's how you know that this is coordinated. And it's not being coordinated by the so-called left, and it's not even being coordinated by the right. This is being coordinated by all of the individuals, again, who have the communications between these people. They probably got a hold of these women in advance, gave them military protection, told them, don't worry, you're going to be protected, you're going to be compensated, everything's going to be okay, we'll protect you, and we're going to take this individual down. And then, of course, they were all like, sweet, this is great, let's do it. And then they did. And again, this is for salacious stuff. This is not, I'm not downplaying, of course, the accusations and the illegality. That's a big problem, clearly. But if people believe that Swalwell's the only one in Congress who's done that, of course, they're tricking themselves. But when you slide over into the business of treason and sedition, like what Adam Schiff is engaged in and endless other members of Congress, well, that's when you get to wrap them all up and scoop them all up at the same time. And that's happening here, but it's happening slowly. But it's still happening. So, yeah, I think this is going to be fun to watch. I'm just sitting back and enjoying it, frankly. Okay, let me move on to this. This also, again, is disturbing, but not. It's not unusual in one of the ways in which it's disturbing, but there's another aspect of this which I want to get into more specifically. Data Republican over on X brought up the fake Charlie Kirk assassination, but they comment on it like it was real, when clearly it wasn't. But what they bring up more specifically is the environment around the university, of course, in Utah there where this took place, and the people who live there and what they basically are doing and have been doing and the social engineering in which they've been engaging in. And these are CIA, I'd certainly say deep state, black hat individuals. And this specifically has to do with something that is called Dignity Index, or the Dignity Index. And let me just read this first part of this thread. Again, I'm not going to read her whole thread here because I want to get into what the Dignity Index actually means. So they said the following, and again, you can take their comments about Kirk, I don't know, with a grain of salt, certainly. But they said the following. Charlie Kirk was assassinated at Utah Valley University. Within 2 hours, leaders of 7 bridge building organizations, quote unquote, assembled on a conference call. Why so fast? Because UVU was their campus. This is Maury Giles, incoming CEO of Braver Angels, admitting on camera at the National Conference on Citizenship, quote, within 2 hours of the assassination, a group of us, all Utahns, we gathered on a call. we'd rather become friends over the last 5 years through our work in the community. And we also happen to be leaders in 7 different national organizations that work in civic renewal, unquote. And then they said 2 hours, 7 national organizations, but this wasn't a spontaneous reaction to a tragedy. This was a network protecting its home turf. Because UVU wasn't just the place where Kirk was shot, it was the institutional center of the entire bridge building dignity index apparatus, and had been for years. And then they said, and the kicker, these 7 national organizations don't hide their own intent. Replicate color revolution tactics in the United States. And yes, that includes MWEG, Mormon Women for Ethical Government. They said they have the receipts, here's the thread, and then they play audio from some of these individuals, again, all admitting this dignity index and what this all means. And in many cases, these CIA stooges are all on stage discussing this. And these women are nuts, to be frank. They're just crazy. But I want to get specifically into the dignity index and what this is. This is social engineering 101, which is why these people, again, are members of a cult and they're completely crazy. Here's Grok's definition of the dignity index and how it breaks down and who started it. It says the dignity index is an 8-point scale from 1 to 8 that measures the level of contempt versus dignity in language, particularly in speech or writing when people disagree. It was developed by the organization Unite, a national initiative aimed at easing divisions, preventing violence, and solving problems in collaboration with researchers, including input from figures like Tim Shriver and Tom Roschert, if that's how you say their names. Again, even Data Republican would say this has less to do with word usage, although it does, and it has far more to do with overthrowing a country by, again, using social engineering and brainwashing tactics to get people to censor themselves and then censor the kinds of conversations that they have about endless other people. So specifically, Data Republican said, when they say dignity, they don't mean getting along. They mean dignity, quote unquote, in the willing to invoke a color revolution sense. So basically, again, how many people like government, how many people don't, how many people agree with us, how many people don't. It's all confusing because it's designed to be. But it's word usage and self-censorship, and this is, again, where it gets really disgusting. It says the following then. It says how the scale works. Lower scores, 1 through 4, reflect contempt, divisiveness, or a lack of dignity. These indicate language that shut down dialogue, expresses superiority, dehumanizes others, or escalates conflict. Score 1 represents the most severe contempt, for example, seeing no dignity in the other person at all. And then higher scores, 5 through 8, reflect dignity, respect, empathy, and openness to mutual understanding. These promote bridge building, acknowledge the humanity of others, and focus on shared problem solving, and score 8 represents the highest level of dignity-grounded communication. Now here's the funny part, and this is, of course, the stereotypical, hypocritical part of all of this. If you took such a ridiculous scale when it comes to word usage, and you put it back on the very people who created it in the first place, they would fail their own application. They would fail their own test. Because you would look at them, for example, and say, well, what you're doing is communistic. And they would say, well, you score low on my scale because you just name-called and you think that I'm trying to hurt people or control speech or whatever, and I'm clearly not, so you're wrong. Which means then I would look back at them and say, actually, you score a 1 because you just dismissed everything that I just said, even though everything I just said is 100% true. It's 100%, again, social engineering 101 because it's designed to control speech and then thereby control thought and then further that and control not only conversations, but get people to believe that every single word, sentence, paragraph, book, whatever, conversation even between a people or a group of people has to be scored or run through some kind of a scoring system to again ultimately judge a person and figure out whether or not said person is smart enough to continue to talk to or dignified enough to continue to talk to. Then that's exactly what they're aiming to do, because that's how you take over a country, is you control their speech, what they can and cannot say, and then the conversations in which they can and cannot have, followed by any conversation or person or people for which they can have a conversation with. The whole COVID lie was a perfect experiment of all of that. And it showed exactly the division between human beings. And this is the part of all of that, again, from the past that I'm so disappointed that so many people seem to have amnesia about, because I remember it like it was yesterday. Not only, of course, did they close all of the establishments where people could have communicated and talked about what was really going on, but it almost became verboten to even bring up COVID, let alone bring it up as if it was a lie or a government trick. When again, it obviously was, for those of us who have read about such social engineering platforms before and behaviors before and programs before, that the speed with which it hit the airwaves, the television, again, radio commercials, radio ads, the entire economic infrastructure of our country in the entire world. That should have been the first red flag that this is all being coordinated from the top down and the inside out. And your average citizen is downstream from all of that, being taken advantage of. That should have been the first red flag. But that too, again, was a dignity index, because if an individual knew that this was a lie, didn't wear a mask, didn't stand on the sticker, didn't take the shot, didn't go to a doctor, or even fought back clearly against all of that, like I did, then what did the other side do? Well, they name-called. They said, you're a fool, you're killing people, you're hurting people. And then, of course, the media doubled down, and the media told everybody that. And Joe Biden even got on television and told everybody that the unvaccinated were a threat to humanity, or whatever the hell he said. It was something close to that, but that we are the problem. So now they're again trying to control words, language, and speech. It just so happens they're trying to do it not just around the fake Charlie Kirk event. That's just a small piece. It has to do with everything. And that people need to understand that these think tanks exist. And they're not thinking, of course, they're just corrupt. And they're horrible, horrible people. It goes on here, this explanation. It says the tool evaluates specific phrases or passages. For example, sound bites from speeches, ads, social media, or everyday conversations, rather than judging the speaker as a whole. It emphasizes the impact and tone of the words, drawing from research in conflict resolution, moral development, relationship science, and philosophy of human dignity. Again, at face value, they're trying to make it sound like they are the moral high ground. But really, what are they? They're attempting to be the thought police, the speech police. Well, if we say it's dignified, if we say it's conflict resolution, if we think it's morally sound, then it is. And, of course, if you question that, then you are the problem. Here's the purpose and application of this. It says the Dignity Index aims to raise awareness of how language affects polarization, encourage people to self-monitor. Here you go. Here's where it is. Here's the communism. Self-monitor and improve their own communication, starting with scoring yourself, quote unquote. Hold public figures like politicians accountable by analyzing their rhetoric without partisan bias. Again, it sounds nice, but that's not really its intent. And then it says foster better conversations in politics, workplaces, schools, families, and other settings to reduce hostility and enable problem solving. We know that that's not what they intend. That's never what the hard communist left intends. They just veil all of it in all of these nice sounding words. Well, let's just all get along. Can't we all get along? And you don't have to be so hostile. Where's the hostility really come from, though? It always comes from communism. It doesn't come from anything that is free. It doesn't come from freedom and independence. The hostility comes from communism when you try to shackle freedom and independence. And then again, they play word games to make it sound like they have the moral high ground. It goes on, it says it's been used in pilot projects, for example, scoring Utah congressional races, national tracking polls like the Dignity Barometer, that's nice, workshops and training. Anyone can learn to apply it using publicly available rubrics and guides. It's social engineering, brainwashing, cult nonsense. It wraps up, it says, note that Dignity Index specifically refers to this communication tool in most current contexts. There are rarer, unrelated uses of similar phrasing, for example, proposals for measuring human dignity globally or workplace dignity metrics, but they are not the primary or widely recognized dignity index. In short, they say it's actually practical, which it's not. They say it's practical, research-based framework for quantifying and improving how we talk to each other, especially across differences, to build more respectful discourse. And they have a website, dignity.us, more details, scoring tools, and examples. Now, as you might imagine, this is how this can be bent into basically, I would say, any aspect of what a color revolution would have to entail. You have to divide people. That's number one. You have to convince people that they're divided. That's number two. You have to create these NGOs and all these groups and speeches and charts, and you have to basically, again, propagandize and use evil propaganda to convince people that they are divided. And that the reason that they are divided is basically because one side is undignified, whereas the other is more dignified than the other. And then, of course, because they use the word dignity, and that everybody deserves dignity and everybody deserves respect, what do you think that means? It basically means you need to tolerate people who are not you all of the time. Because if you don't, then you're not being dignified. Take it a step further. If I don't support illegal Somalis robbing me, then I'm not dignified. That they get to live here too. That illegal aliens get to live here all of the time if they want, because they deserve dignity too. That's the bend. And that's the real social engineering aspect of all of it, is advancing the melting pot nonsense and getting people to believe that if you surround yourself with foreigners, don't worry, everything is going to be okay. Now, on their website, they have numerous charts, which are absolutely hilarious. And as you would expect, they have a particular bend to all of this. One of the charts that they show, again, this is one of those exercises where you can read between the lines if you know what you're looking at. But it says the following here. One of these charts is Scoring Subcultures. It's titled Family and Volunteer Organizations are where the public see the highest levels of dignity. Social media and politics embody the highest levels of contempt. Now, again, I could probably spend an hour on this alone, and I'm not going to, but at the bottom of the chart, again, based on what they just said, they claim that politics and campaigns and online social media platforms have the highest levels of contempt, upwards of 55%, give or take. For both, generally speaking. 55 to whatever it is, 66%. So that's where they claim that most of the division takes place based on their definition of dignity. When in fact, what goes on in politics and campaigns and online social media platforms? What really goes on is a sharing of the truth by and large. and people trying to dig down into what the truth is. But they mischaracterize that as being a lack of dignity, having a lack of dignity. Therefore, if you're asking questions, engaging in investigations, and looking for factual information, then you're less dignified. That's just one of many ways to interpret this. On the other end of the chart, you have the immediate family and volunteer organizations as being the highest dignified environments that exist. Again, that's not necessarily true either. A lot of these volunteer organizations are globalists, and they're all the same kinds of people. They're not diverse by any stretch. And then it goes into religious and other faith-based groups. Again, all generally the same within a specified area, so there would be the illusion of everybody being dignified, when in fact that, when you compare it to something else or another group, they probably aren't. And then very stereotypically, you then have K12 schools, colleges and universities, workplaces, and local government. So they claim that K12 schools rate extremely high levels of dignity among 30% of all K12 schools, with 26% rating on their scale of 6 to 7. Again, this can be interpreted lots of different ways. We know that the American K12 school system is arguably the most divisive, which means real dignity, as the real definition of the real world would indicate, that they again, or you could even use the word tolerance, which again, tolerance is another globalist word and social engineering word, that you're supposed to tolerate a kid who wears cat ears and shits in a litter box in the girls' restroom when they're a boy. That's basically their definition of both tolerance and dignity. That if you allow that to happen, then you're dignified. And if you disagree with it, then you're not. But there's no environment more, I would say, prepared for and designed to socially engineer than an American K-12 school, and then, of course, brick and mortar college and university. It's why they exist. They're not there for learning. They're there for brainwashing. You can also interpret this chart this way, too. You can look at, again, the top half, immediate family, volunteer organizations, religious or other faith-based groups, K-12 schools, colleges and universities, workplaces, and local government. Okay, these are the top, 7 groups, 7 categories on this chart. What do most of those categories that I just mentioned there, what parameters do they have within those institutions and those organizations, or those, whatever you want to call them, fields of study or places of employment? What is it that they all have in place that would basically keep people from having real dialogue and real discourse among one another? They have rules, don't they? There are rules, there are policies, there are procedures, and then there's HR departments and complaint avenues and grievance avenues. Basically meaning, if you associate with any of those institutions, K-12 schools, universities, workplaces, local government, and you disagree with somebody, then something is going to happen to you for disagreeing with them. There's a consequence to that, which means what's dignified about that? And the answer is nothing, because that's slavery. There's no open discourse. There's no open sharing of ideas. There's the threat of retaliation. There's the threat of non-compliance. Well, you're being insubordinate, and a number of other words that they would use within those environments. And then, of course, they gaslight you into believing that they are a free part of an open society, so to speak, and that everybody has a say and we care about everybody's voice. But if you say something that goes against what the people in charge believe in, then you're the one who gets cast out. And that right there is how you overthrow a government. That's how you overthrow a country. That's how you overthrow an institution. You create such a ridiculous index, like this dignity index, and you basically say again, here's how we think you score on this. So somebody else gets to decide what they think about you. But remember, you don't get to decide what you think about them. And if you do, and they don't like your score, you're still going to get fired. You're still going to be ostracized. It's the illusion of fairness because it's always been that way. It's the illusion of equality when there is none. A black in a working environment can put down a white in the blink of an eye. That's been going on for how long? A long time, 20 some odd years at least. It was during the Obama years when they really started to get away with it. Blacks were giving presentations in endless conferences and endless working environments for endless professions and careers, openly saying all white people are racist. Systemic racism, quote unquote. See, they would say, well, that scores high on the dignity index because they're allowed to say that because that creates a dialogue. But when you flip that coin and you say, actually, blacks make up the minority of the population and commit most of the violent crime in our country. And the reason for failing test scores in most schools is because of minority and illegal students who can't read, write, comprehend, or spell their own name, let alone speak the English language. Everything I just said is true. But if I say it in a working environment, I'm undignified, I'm a racist, a bigot, a homophobe, a whatever, any other phobe you want to come up with, and that's their approach. Go back to the fake Charlie Kirk assassination real quick, and the way that Erica Kirk is behaving. And of course, lying about endless things. And everybody knows that her mom is a CIA spook or works for the NSA or whatever the hell it is. I mean, and same thing with Charlie Kirk. I mean, their entire family is deep state. Like I've said before, you don't find yourself on a stage like that with any semblance of consistency and not be deep state to some extent. You have to be. It's the only reason you're there. But apparently the other day, again, they have this TPUSA event with the Brian Colfag, I don't know what his name is, don't really care. But he was on stage with J.D. Vance in this stadium, in this indoor venue, and hardly anybody was there. It wasn't packed at all. And again, numerous cameras were showing the room, and it's like, wow, this is empty. The Vice President of the United States is there on stage, and it's dead empty. Because the TPUSA message is being lost on people because people don't care about it because they see through it. But they, of course, react the way that they react by saying, well, Erica Kirk was going to be here to speak, but her life is being threatened. No, it isn't. And if it is being threatened, it's being threatened by people who probably know what the truth is, that she's a grifting liar. But again, if you say that, based on any dignity score, dignity index, or dignity barometer, or whatever measurement scale when it comes to speech and thought and word usage and dialogue, they would say you're not being dignified. On the contrary, you're being the most objective, which is the trick. The more objective you are, the less dignified they think you are. That's the real definition of it. And it's designed to blur the lines of morality, blur the lines of morals and values, and blur the lines of what's true and what isn't. And get everybody to basically just believe nothing or believe everything that they're told. That's social engineering 101. And it works all of the time. It's very effective. But with that said, it has an expiration date to an extent. And you can wear people out with it. With so many things that basically just seem so hinky over and over and over again that eventually people pick up on it and they go, wait a minute, these people are trying to control the way that we think, the way that we talk, the way that we write, and what's acceptable and what isn't. Which means they're the enemy, which means everything that they are speaking about or embodying or trying to show us or being affiliated with is probably a very bad thing. and then people snap out of it. The question is whether or not they fall back into it. I'll leave it there regarding the dignity index thing, but understand again that exists, that people get paid to advance things like that to NGOs, and then you can see how it slides right into an American classroom because they're the last ones to get it. It works its way through workplaces, HR departments, and then classrooms, and then right into the lap of a school teacher who's then forced to teach such a ridiculous thing to students because, of course, they're the most impressionable. And if you can get a student to self-censor, or an American specifically to self-censor, then they will censor themselves for the rest of their lives and walk around in a prison of their own mind, not knowing what they can and cannot think or can and cannot say. That's a huge problem. But let me wrap it up actually by reading this particular post. I think this is kind of connected, and it certainly is, I think, culturally anyway, kind of the state of affairs in our country. Although this seems new to this individual, when I would say that it's kind of always been this way, but it's being more, I would say, more heavily defined and it's certainly more pronounced. This was from a Harlan Hill on X, and they went to the Masters tournament in Augusta, Georgia, this last weekend. And they said the following, quote, "I had the privilege of attending the Masters this weekend, and I left feeling grateful for the experience, nostalgic, sad, and angry. What struck me first was how civilized it felt. Everything was clean, orderly, efficient, and polite. No piss-stained floors, no litter, no phones, no doom scrolling. People were respectful and present. You had to actually enjoy the moment, talk to your friends, and make a plan if you wanted to find each other again in a crowd of 40,000 people. Side note, because you're not allowed to bring in phones, which means, remember those days of going to some big event like a town, whatever, a county fair or a massive antique place outside. I used to do that. We used to do that with family and stuff like that. And we basically either stick together, or you would say, okay, we're going to meet over at this place at this particular time. And if you don't have a watch on, then ask somebody what the time is, and then we'll meet you over here and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's what we used to do when we didn't have cell phones. But they went on and they said that was what made me nostalgic. It reminded me of my childhood, of an America that was clean, orderly, affordable, and built for ordinary families. And they wrapped up and they said this, and that is also what made me sad and then angry. Because today, that kind of environment feels less like normal American life and more like a luxury experience cordoned off for the rich. They said what used to be common in this country, safety, order, civility, affordability, etc., now feels exclusive, unquote. Unfortunately, it's kind of always been that way. But at the same time, where the inroad, certainly when it comes to the people who support something like a dignity index, those social engineers and color revolutionaries who are interested in destroying a country, is they know that you have to destroy the individual also. And the way that you do that is by redefining what a family is and destroying things like the sanctity of marriage. And you can pick any topic you want, but that's basically it. Again, if you can attack an individual, then ultimately you will control the society. Anytime I think of something like that too, I think of pajamas at airports. Pajamas on airplanes, the number of people who don't dress up when they go outside or they go out in public. They just wear pajamas. I personally find this disgusting. That's my take. I think it's lazy. I think it looks fat, lazy, and stupid. But there are people who do that. And that's social engineering also. It's designed, again, to get people to believe that a certain example is acceptable when clearly in the past it's never been. Now, there's lots of corruption with the Masters tournament and all of that, as one might imagine. It's a bunch of old, very corrupt individuals who backtrack for money, and they do whatever they have to do for money. Case in point, real quick, with that tournament, you had the year before all of these players leave the PGA Tour to chase money in the LIV Tour, which was that Greg Norman Saudi Arabia tour, basically, where there was a point system and different scoring and all of that, and the payouts were massive, even for people who finished like in 10th place. But the Masters tournament openly said, hey, look, if you leave for the Live Tour and you leave the PGA Tour, then you're not allowed to play the Masters anymore. And they said, okay, fine. And then they reneged on that, because a lot of the players left the Live Tour. I don't even know if the Live Tour exists anymore, but they left it. And then they came back and they said, hey, we want to play in the Masters. And all the Augusta National, green jacket wearing old guys who get together and make all these decisions, they were like, yeah, you can come back, no problem. See, the thing with the thing that this person is correct about is that such an environment like that is just that. It's clean. It looks clean. It looks pristine. It looks elegant. But that's not because of the old bastards wearing the green coats calling the shots. It looks the way that it looks because of the people who actually do the hard work to make it look that way. I used to work on a grounds crew of a golf course when I was in college. That was my job. I did it for at least 2 years. It was hard work. It was highly educational. I mean, I kind of enjoyed it in a sick kind of way because, again, it was good work. It was hard work. I didn't get paid anything, but I learned a great deal, and you learn to maintain things and improve things and make something look good and then keep it looking good. That's important. But there's a level of corruption with some of that also, where decisions have to be made behind the scenes that no one actually sees because they're too busy looking at the flowers or how green the grass is. That's part of the illusion of all of it. But it's just about personal responsibility and a person carrying themselves as professionally as they can as an individual and trying to block out as much as humanly possible all of the satanic social engineering, whatever you want to call it, influence that works its way and is constantly trying to make inroads in you as an individual. Because it's always trying to make inroads on society as a whole. But ultimately, it's about coming after you as the individual and getting you to look like everybody else. Again, I understand what the individual is saying about the Masters tournament and rules and order and the unwritten rules that exist and a number of other things. I watched an entire presentation on it just the other day, actually. I think it was last weekend. And they were, again, openly talking about how the prices of food and drink at the Masters tournament hasn't changed in decades. They have sandwiches for $1.50. They have beers for $5 or less. They have soft drinks for $2. I mean, it's things like that. That if you show up with a lawn chair, you get to put your lawn chair anywhere you want in the designated areas for lawn chairs. And if you get up and you leave your lawn chair, no one is allowed to move your chair and no one is allowed to sit in it. You can leave it there all day long. I mean, these are, again, these are good sort of unwritten rules of a civilized society. But the problem, of course, is that there are endless evil forces working against that all of the time and trying to influence particular areas all of the time and make them degenerate all of the time. And it's gotten so privatized now that it takes a small area, a small, nice area in what is otherwise a very poor area of Georgia. Augusta, Georgia is poverty-stricken, to say the least. If you've ever even been there, let alone seen the footage that is around the actual golf club itself, everything around it is not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. But either way, again, it's a perfect example of how things can be very civilized on a very privatized level. But they can also be very disgusting on a privatized level as well. So, to wrap this up, I would just say again, it's about individual responsibility. If individuals just started to carry themselves a little bit differently in public, with the way they look, the way they talk, the way that they behave, not bother other people, but just carry themselves and lead by example, then perhaps other people will see that and then maybe want to improve one thing or two things or three things about themselves. So again, the last time, for example, I'm going to go back to the pajama thing in airports real quick. The last time I was in an airport was 2019. And I was in a lot of airports in 2019 in a span of about 2 months. And I was repulsed by the way that people dressed and the way that they behaved and everything, that almost immediately I said, I'm never going to fly again. And I was just flat out outnumbered. I was dressed very appropriately. I always dress casual, or I would wear a suit, a casual suit, but that would always be the way that I would dress typically on an airplane. Seeing the way that, again, people would dress and people would behave, it was like riding a bus in an inner city. It was gross. And therein lies the issue. So all I could do was carry myself the way that I wanted to carry myself. And if somebody saw it and made fun of it, well, that's their problem. But if somebody saw it and said, you know what, I'm dressed like a slob, I should dress like him because I'm staring at him in a good way, as opposed to looking at somebody who's ugly and, sneering at him, then that's kind of the point. You just have to set the example by yourself first and just hope that other people follow. Or you can just leave the environment altogether, which is what I've done. I mean, you'd have to drag me onto an airplane these days, or I'd wear a tuxedo. But either way, yeah. It's sad, but it's social engineering. And it makes inroads in lots of different ways and lots of different areas. Now, speaking of that, let me slide into education, because this is fascinating. I've got a few education stories here, and believe it or not, they're all kind of connected in all one similar way. As we know, one of the avenues in the field of American education that seeks to make everything degenerate are the teachers' unions. And the teachers' unions are so degenerate and such a mafia and love social engineering so much that they go out of their way to actually sue state governments, because state governments are reallocating their funds for private school vouchers. And this was sent to me by a family member in Missouri, and it says, Missouri judge dismisses lawsuit over $50 million in private school voucher funding. The Missouri National Education Association, communistic union, which raised the initial challenge, plans to appeal to the state's highest court. So they decided to sue the state because the state is giving $50 million for vouchers, for school choice, for, again, children and their families, of course, to find other means of education. And in typical fashion, the communistic, socially controlling public school union apparatus didn't like it and decided to sue them, and they lost. Or at least, again, it was thrown out by this particular judge because it's already law. It's state law. Very succinctly put, it says, quote, in a 57-page ruling, Judge Brian Stumpy, if that's his real name, wrote the lawmakers could directly appropriate funds to the Missouri Scholars, the MO Scholars Program, because state law does not expressly prohibit it. Right. I mean, it's that simple. It goes on, it says Missouri's NEA, National Education Association, communistic union, has 45,000 union-represented educators, and they think that families deserve a simple guarantee. If a school takes your tax dollars, it must welcome your child. Well, the whole point is they don't want you to have their tax dollars anymore. They want to be able to spend their tax dollars on their child in a school of their choice. And if that means, again, that their child attends 10 different schools across K12 through senior and high school, then so be it. The whole thing will collapse when state law gets written for any homeschooling program to be funded through state funds or that family's own taxes, to where they, again, don't have to pay the local school district any tax whatsoever. And they can use that money for their own education for their own children, because it's their money to begin with. That's when the tide will really change. In fact, the tide is already changing. let me mention this. This was huge. And I mean, this is huge. This happened just the other day. The Cleveland Metropolitan School District in Cleveland, Ohio, one of the largest in the state, confirmed 410 full-time layoffs. But this figure includes 146 teachers, 86 administrators, and 120 support staff, which includes paraprofessionals, nurses, and counselors. So it's not just 400 teachers by themselves. It says these layoffs announced last Friday and officially approved by the Board of Education on Tuesday, April 14th of 2026, are part of the Building Brighter Futures plan, quote unquote, designed to save $30 to $50 million annually amid a 50% enrollment decline over the past 20 years. 50% enrollment decline in 20 years. Now, you know where I'm going with this because I've mentioned this percentage in the past and how this percentage is reigning true and holding true statistically when it comes to breaking a school district. It's the statistic and percentage of 11%, that if you have an 11% drop in enrollment, your district will fold. So they had a 50% enrollment decline over 20 years. That's a 25% enrollment decline in the last 10 years. Now divide that in half again. That's over 11% in the last 5 years. What's happened over the last 5 years that would cause an over 11% in enrollment decline? The COVID lie, rampant child abuse, and people waking up to it, even in Cleveland. The reasoning for this, of course, as the superintendent or CEO would say, this Warren Morgan, specifically cited a budget deficit of nearly $50 million by 2029 and a need to consolidate 29 schools to align staffing with the current student population of roughly 34,000 students. And then, of course, the public outrage and, oh my God, we're going to have to change schools and you're closing schools and what are we going to do? And then the union screaming about it, apparently claiming that they don't face any kind of a deficit whatsoever and that they need to cut more administrator roles and XYZ. Again, no one overspends like a school district, but no one falls for social engineering quite like a school district. They always get set up to get knocked down, and they don't know it because they react to endless things that exist on their TV and in politics when that's not what they should be doing. And then all of the outside influence coming in with the teachers' unions and the brainwashing and all of it. Again, it's a bad business model. It's designed to fail. And this is a perfect example as to why. I'm not sad about this in the slightest. I love it. Again, over 11% are gone in 5 years. And that's multiplying. I mean, that's not going to go away. That number is going to increase. Let me play this too. In fact, I could take this anywhere. My God, I've got so many things here on this subject alone. Let me read you this real quick because this is important. I was going to end the education portion of this show, this particular episode, with this clip, but I'm going to play it now. This was on X. This was written by apparently a Dustin at ROCK3T23. And they said the following here. They said Elon Musk just put the entire university system on trial. Not the curriculum, not the professors, the premise. Elon Musk said the following in this particular clip, which I'll play here in a second. Again, there are certain things I agree with him on and plenty I don't. But either way, he makes a very good point here, and it's a point I've made for a very long time. He said, quote, "You don't need college to learn stuff. Everything is available basically for free. You can learn anything you want for free. For 1,000 years, universities held one monopoly, access. You paid the toll, and you stayed ignorant. The internet erased that in a decade." This isn't Elon talking anymore, but the other person writing. They said every lecture, every framework, every textbook, free, from any screen on Earth. The 6-figure tuition is no longer buying knowledge. It is buying a signal. Elon Musk went on and said, quote, There is a value that colleges have, which is seeing whether somebody can work hard at something, including a bunch of annoying homework assignments, and still do their homework assignments, unquote. That is the product, not intelligence, not creativity, not vision, compliance. You are paying $200,000 to prove you can tolerate bureaucracy on a schedule. Musk went on and said colleges are basically for fun and to prove you can do your chores, but they're not for learning, unquote. He's right. The original poster went on and said the entire system is a sorting machine for corporate HR. It does not measure what you can build. It measures whether you can sit still, follow directions, and deliver on command. 4 years of obedience dressed as education. Musk went on and said, quote, if you're trying to do something exceptional, you must have evidence of exceptional ability. I don't consider going to college evidence of exceptional ability, unquote. The system optimizes for average. It rewards the compliant. It certifies the patient. It quietly filters out everyone who refuses to wait for permission. The ones who reshaped the modern world never finished the test. Musk went on and said, quote, Gates is a pretty smart guy. He dropped out. Jobs is pretty smart. He dropped out. Larry Ellison, smart guy. He dropped out, unquote. Well, they're also all immoral pieces of shit, but whatever. The original poster went on and wrapped up and said, they did not drop out because it was too hard. They dropped out because the speed limit was too slow. The most dangerous thing a university does is convince a generational talent that finishing the syllabus is an achievement. It is not. It is the floor. A degree is a receipt for compliance. The future has never belonged to people who finish their homework. It belongs to the ones who never needed the assignment, unquote. He's right. And they're both right in that regard. I wanted to read this too very quickly. This was sent to me by Cicely Hellickson from Artesia, New Mexico, and this is hilarious because I've spoken about this before. This is also part of the social engineering, and it's that time of year where phone call pranks are going to start continuing to ramp up, and threats of school shootings and the whole thing, only to find out that the phone call came from another place through using a VPN. They said the following here, quote, again, this was on Instagram. Good evening, APS families. Below is a detailed message that I just received from the Artesia Police Department. I hope this gives you more clarity. Thank you, Mrs. Yaramillo. The APD press release that at 1:13 p.m. this afternoon, Artesia High School received a non-specific threat indicating that a shooting would occur. School staff immediately reported the incident to the school resource officer, sergeant, who is assigned full-time to the campus. The SRO sergeant promptly coordinated response efforts with the SRO officers, on-duty patrol officers, and detectives from the Artesia Police Department's Criminal Investigations Division. Additional assistance was provided by surrounding law enforcement agencies, including federal law enforcement partners, to ensure a comprehensive response. As a precautionary measure, law enforcement personnel were deployed to every school within the district and remained on site until all students had safely departed each campus. The Criminal Investigations Division has since completed its investigation and determined that the threat originated from a phone number located in another state. The investigation further revealed that the call was part of a series of similar calls made nationwide, commonly referred to as swatting. All information uncovered during the investigation has been forwarded to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for review. They won't catch anybody. The Artesia Police Department takes all these threats seriously and remains committed to the safety and security of students, staff, and the community, and the blah, 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 blah. You get the point. Robocalls. That's all. They're all patched into it. And who's to say that the call really didn't come from somebody from within again, a surrounding police agency or a three-letter agency like the CIA or the FBI themselves? Could have. This will continue to happen because this is the way that it goes. What these people don't understand is, and certainly the victims downhill from all of this, like the school employees, the students, and the parents, is that this only happens in these environments. There isn't another environment where such robocalls take place. It's just schools. And there are people who know that and know how to get away with it. And they do it all of the time. And of course, these people never get caught. And it's done again, also in an effort to consistently brainwash people and socially engineer them into believing that the school is somehow a safe environment. Well, if that's true, why is it that schools are the only ones that get targeted like this? Are you receiving robocalls at home from people saying that they're going to come and kill you? Do you get those at work? Does that happen all the time? Or ever? Of course not. Which leads me to this now. If anybody wants a good laugh, or you want to get your fingers on the pulse of what's really going on in the business of education, as I recommend always, bounce over to Reddit and get on their subreddit called Teachers. It's too funny. And it's very true in many aspects. Again, I could, create a YouTube channel just commenting on all of these posts and providing some analysis, I suppose, but that would be exhausting. It'd be funny, I'm sure, but just exhausting. Here's one. This is recent from just a few hours ago as I'm recording this. It was titled, "Do Not Become a Teacher." It says, quote, "It is only going to get worse. The children today are awful. Their parents are morons, and the laws handcuff every school when it comes to properly dealing with bad behaviors. There are a million other professions you can make the same amount of money in without this nonsense. This career will take years off of your life. If you are considering this profession, heed this warning from a 17-year vet who has had enough. It will never get better," they said, unquote. Of course, you have to have a virtue signaler respond, and they're basically just like, "I've been working for 10 years, and I love where I work, and it's great, and everybody's great." Well, that's a naive person. That's a naive person who doesn't understand that probably their next door neighbor in their school is being mistreated and abused by the people who work there. Again, you'd be surprised, but although perhaps not, as to how many people have their head in the sand about the very things that go on within their own building. Here's another person though, with their head on straight, responding to that original post, and they said the following, quote, "I've been in this district for 10 years. When I started, the principal and superintendent had been there 20 plus years. The district had a reputation for being good, high retention. Then they both retired. Since then, we've had 3 principals, 2 superintendents, and 3 science directors, and a merry-go-round of rotating assistant principals, all trying to use us as a stepping stone to the next bigger, better job. The student population has been getting worse and worse academically and behaviorally. The frequent turnover of administration means that we've been inundated with new initiatives as each one tries to make their mark, quote unquote, which means that they are filled with acronyms and bullet points that sound good to a press release or on their resume, and none want to push back against parents or the school board, which is elected mostly by the parents. So we are left with milquetoast behavior policies. That's on top of our state changing the science standards, which brought about a disastrous change in the standardized high school assessments, while also hinting that they will be removing those assessments as a graduation requirement, but being extremely vague and tight-lipped about what they will look like, unquote. Yeah. These threads, again, they go on for days. They're so funny. Here's one. It was titled, "I Can't Anymore with These Kids." This is from days ago. They said, "I never realize how ridiculous things are until I catch up with old friends and start to talk about work. Why the hell are our middle school boys signing, quote, Chud Goy Click makes the foids shake, unquote? What does that even mean? They're calling the girls in the class goon bait, quote unquote, and making George Floyd jokes. These kids were 8 when he died. Calls home don't make a difference when 90% of the parents couldn't care less or don't believe their perfect angel did anything wrong. Thank God for spring break. We need it more than they do," unquote. Oh, it's hilarious. Chud Goy clicks make the foids shake. Goon bait. Oh, it's posts like this where you know that kids are going to be all right in the long run. I mean, they're waking up, which is good. Imagine how quickly they'd wake up and how more advanced they'd be if they actually left these environments. Here was another one. They said, let's see, what are you tired of dealing with because parents just aren't parenting anymore? They said, I'll go first. The sheer number of students below grade level, and no, before anyone jumps in, I am not talking about students with disabilities, don't even go there. I'm talking about the majority of otherwise capable kids who go home, do absolutely nothing academic, and no one at home cares enough to reinforce anything. No reading, no studying, no, hey, did you finish your work? Just vibes. And then they come back to school and we're expected to somehow fix years of that, going over basic concepts they should have already committed to memory. It makes zero sense that I'm standing in front of 8th graders having to repeatedly explain what a noun is. A noun. Like we're back in 2nd grade, over and over and over again. At some point, we have to be honest, this isn't just a school problem. There is no accountability, no structure, no expectation at home. What exactly are we building on? Unquote. Well, they've got a point. Depends on the family, of course, depends on the environment, but they have a point. There's another one. SAT proctor leaves to get pizza for kids in the middle of the test. They said, real story happened today. I'm the building testing coordinator. Got a call from a room monitor saying the student XYZ was stuck. Their computer had a power hiccup and couldn't continue. I give directions saying to have the proctor in the room hit the continue test button for the student and all should be good. Told on the phone that wasn't an option. So I walked down there figuring that even though both adults had done testing before, just a new situation for them and they needed a bit of hand-holding, no big deal. When I got there, no proctor. I asked, where is Mr. AAA, the proctor? And the response from the room monitor was, oh, he left 20 to 25 minutes ago to get pizza for the kids. What? Yeah, the proctor left and his computer was locked up, so the room monitor couldn't hit the button. So I go back to my office, hit the button for the kid, and go back to make sure that he is good to go. Fortunately, he was, and he completed his test just fine. When I told the principal, he didn't even believe that such a thing could have happened until he reviewed the security footage, kept mumbling things like, no way, gone for over half an hour, quote unquote. Couldn't have been pizza, quote unquote. Must have just been an emergency personal phone call or something, quote unquote. And then, well, that isn't even enough pizza for all those kids, quote unquote. Can't wait to see what the college board does once they get this incident report. Only saving grace is that I don't think any of the tests got invalidated, as the room monitor was still there. The one kid lost 15 to 20 minutes of his testing, but told me he finished with plenty of time left, so losing that time didn't really mean anything to him, unquote. Well, it's an SAT test, so who gives a shit one way or another? But either way, that's hilarious. And that's the level of negligence that exists. And that person will keep their job. They might even get an award. Hell, I worked with people, veteran teachers, way older than me at the time, and they would open up the test, the actual test bank that had sample questions in it. And they would do that before the test was administered, and then they would coach their students on what kinds of questions were on the test using actual questions that were on the test. The state standardized test, not the SAT test, the state standardized test, which takes place every year in basically every state across the nation. And they would just get their wrist slapped. That was it. They didn't get fired. You can't do that. Well, I'm just trying to help, but you can't do that. Well, I'm just trying to help. And then they're heavily unionized, and then, that's the end of it. They get to keep their job. Worked with another guy who taught nothing but special ed kids, and he flat out took the test for them. They went through the whole damn thing, one at a time, and he was reading the questions to them out loud and then providing answers and letting them all decide on a singular answer at the same time. That's called fraud. Should have lost his license, should have lost his job. Nope, got his hand slapped. Right back in the classroom, no problem. It's amazing. I'm going to read one more just for fun, And then I'll wrap it up with one quick COVID-related story, which is typical and terrible. But this last post said the following: undercover boss, but with parents. They said, just hear me out. What if there was a show where parents went undercover as a substitute teacher? New hair, makeup, voice, etc., and posed as a substitute teacher, lunch monitor, aide, etc. in their child's class. I would love to see the reactions and the excuses. Yes, I know this can't happen for several reasons. Unquote. That would be funny, and they would probably be disgusted and astounded. I almost guarantee that. They would be disgusted and astounded. I've always said it here on the show for years that there should be a 21 Jump Street within every single school district. That real police departments, like real ones, I'm not talking about local police departments that work hand in glove with corrupt school districts, because that basically makes them both corrupt. But you basically have, again, maybe even a 3-letter agency who recruits minors. And I know that this happens like regarding David Hogg and things like that for false flags. But I'm talking like real justice. You have a 21 Jump Street kind of thing where, again, students of age go into these environments, but then they report back to law enforcement or these 3-letter agencies as to who's using drugs, who's selling drugs, who's prostituting themselves, what teachers are doing, saying, administrators, the whole thing. Imagine how you could upend the entire district with such an operation like that. I think that would be very, very cool. And then you publish those results and you put all those people on blast. That would be neat. That would be something I would support 100%. But we can dream, can't we? There's this one now. Jab-related 15-year-old tennis star dies after suffering heart attack on court. Oh, it's probably just because he was an elderly man in a 15-year-old's body. No, that's not it. It says player Luigi Santarelli, 15, was seen laughing with his coach just minutes before he suddenly dropped to the ground, witnesses told GBN News. Medical staff at the Cittadella dello Sports Complex in San Giovanni, Italy, immediately jumped into action to tend to the fallen player, and he was swiftly carted off to a local hospital for emergency treatment, where he died and never regained consciousness. And there you have it. The jabs strike again. And here's another one. Again, it's not a positive note by any stretch, but continuing to happen. This is on the archive website, but it's newly dated here. Titled, New Data Reveal a Staggering Rise in Stillbirths and Miscarriages After the COVID Shot. At this point, can we all agree it was a bioweapon? Written by Olivia Murray, April 13th of this year. It says, of course, if you open up the openveyors.com website and then you go to the source of the chart, you'll find the actual figures of 2020 had 66 miscarriages / stillbirths, and 2021 had 3,428. That's a 5,094% increase for context. There are additional charts with additional data, one of which shows that the greatest number of miscarriages, stillbirths occurred within 24 hours of vaccination. Furthermore, there's a nearly identical trend when you look at menstrual disorders by year. In 2020, that number is 0 or so minuscule that it appears that way, but in 2021, that number was 27,799, a more than 2 million % increase. And apparently you also have Pfizer, who's coming out with a Lyme disease vaccination that is expected to hit the market in 2027. So I think it's safe to say, don't take that. Just a hunch. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening as always. Have a great weekend, and I'll catch you on Monday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.